Welcome back to Combat Mission Shock Force, where everything is a little bit different. This is the beta for the Heaven and Earth mod, which gives Shock Force 2 a Southeast Asia makeover. The first thing to point out here is that Combat Mission isn't the kind of game that has its internal workings on display, and the changes that you can make are essentially cosmetic. So the mod is limited to reskins, changing textures, changing text, and changing what models are used by what units. For example, these are BTRs, but they have an M113 model assigned. The M16s that the infantry have are actually AK-74s. This M72 Law is actually an RPG-16, and so on. This means that there are some things that don't quite work the way they should, but it's all pretty minor, and in any case it's a beta, so it's all work in progress. The second thing to be aware of is that while this looks remarkably like the Vietnam War, it's not. The mod revolves around a civil war in the imaginary state of Bong Hai, rather than an actual historic conflict, which means that the modders have a little bit of creative room to account for all the things they can't change, like squad and platoon organisation, that kind of thing. What we're going to be doing in this video is having a crack at the first mission of one of the campaigns that come with the mod. This is the second Battle of Ikke, or Ikke, which is remarkably similar to the battles of Hue City and Saigon. Rebel forces have seized the city and were commanding the lead element of the Imperial Cavalry's quick reaction force, who are trying to break back in and restore control. The first obstacle is the Quad Doc River, and the only way across are these two bridges. The enemy, likely to be insurgents from the so-called People's Militia, are set up somewhere on the far bank, and it's our job to punch across, drive them off, and secure the bridge exit. To do this, we've got a platoon from the Imperial Armoured Cavalry mounted in M113s, consisting of 3 squads and a sniper team, reinforced by their company HQ, an FO team, and a single BMP-1. Because Bong Hai's Imperial Army will buy anything from anyone. We may be getting some reinforcements from the Riverine force at some point, but apart from that we're on our own. There are no air or artillery assets available. This really isn't good news. I've got a pretty small force here with nowhere near as much firepower as I would like, and I have literally one avenue of approach. I know I only have one, because I didn't like the look of these bridges the instant I saw them, and immediately started looking for places I could swim my M113s across. But the riverbanks are impassable along their entire length, so I'm stuck with the bridges, which lead to a 200 by 300 metre chunk of open ground, flanked on both sides by far more urban terrain than I'm happy about. How do we cross a bridge then? Easy. Loads of smoke on the end of the bridge, massive fire support suppressing the snot out of any likely enemy positions on the far side, and one lucky unit that gets to go across first and find out whether it's mined, booby-trapped or covered from an angle the fire support can't cover. Except I don't have any smoke, so I can't do that bit. And the range to the buildings on the far bank is anything from 300 to 600 metres, so it's not only going to be difficult to spot targets, but the only weapons that can really reach out and touch the enemy at that distance are the heavy machine guns on the M113s, which have 500 rounds each, and the 73mm gun on the BMP, which has 40 rounds. That's not enough weapons to cover both sides of the highway at the same time. But to some extent it doesn't really matter, because there are so many defilade positions available to the enemy that they probably won't be able to get an angle to engage them anyway, and chances are I'm going to be running out of ammunition. So I can't really provide decent fire support from my bank. If I want to put effective fire down, I'll have to get closer. I can at least manage the final step. The cavalry platoon has an attached sniper team who are going to have a good time running across that bridge. They should be able to find a little bit of cover in the partition between the two bridges at the far end, but they've got to get there first. They attract the attention of a rooftop sniper on the right, but none of his shots come anywhere near, and the sniper is driven off by a fire from one of the M113s. Soon though, more insurgents have a go. an RPG is launched over on the right, but it's way off target and spears into the river. My sniper team can see them, but my fire support back on my bank can't get a good angle. I can fix that though, and on the next turn I'm able to shuffle some of my vehicles around to engage that building. The snipers by now have reached the end of the bridge and have hopped over the railing to get into the centre partition, where they're a little bit less exposed. They seem pretty safe here. Either they're harder to spot, or there's only light enemy forces covering the end of the bridge. What I really need are more eyes up there, so under plenty of supporting fire, one of the infantry squads rushes up in its M113. This is risky. The M113 is basically a thin metal box with an engine, and it will not react well to getting hit by an RPG. But I'm not only on a timer here, I really have no idea what I'm up against, so I want to scope out the insurgent positions quickly. The enemy response is a hail of RPGs. One hits the ground just in front of the sniper team at the end of the bridge, then another falls short at the M113 as it slams on the brakes and the infantry pile out. Both RPGs came in from the left this time, and the M113 engages one RPG team before reversing out of the kill zone under fire. The infantry get into the partition behind the sniper team, while the fire support goes to town on the newly revealed insurgent positions, but I'm not getting any new spots. I have gotten some support though. A pair of PBRs have turned up. These aren't tremendously useful here. Under the hood they're BRDM, so they're armed with a single 14.5mm MG instead of the dual 50s, but it shows what you can come up with when you're able to start replacing the models. The boats motor forward a little so they can engage the RPG buildings on the left, which brings the lead vessel a little bit too close to the enemy bank. It's hit by an RPG from that right-hand compound and goes down with all hands. Turns out that while some of their vehicles might float, Pixeltruppen don't. As this is going on, the sniper team hops out from the partition and makes a move towards the riverbank on the right. This is the side I'm in position to deal with first. There are fewer buildings to clear, and my forces can benefit more from the boats. But the team comes under fire from one of the closer buildings, and the sniper goes down, leaving his number 2 cowering in the mud. It's only a single insurgent with an AK, but he's in another defilade position, and the only forces I can engage him with are the squad in the partition, who can't actually draw line of sight to the building but do take some pot shots when they spot him directly, and the remaining boat, which is too far away and too lightly armed to really achieve anything. Meanwhile, my fire support is blazing away to the left and right, and I have no idea if it's actually achieving anything. As I suspected at the start, it seems that I'm really lacking the firepower and angles to fight effectively from my side of the river, so I decide to gamble again and punch forward the MTM-113. This returns to where it dropped its squad off and then crosses the partition. Another RPG sails past from the right, this time from one of the previously spotted RPG teams, which has gone to the bottom floor of its building, where it's now in defilade from all my fire support. Once it's gotten into position though, the M113 is apparently somewhat safe. It's screened a little from the left by the trees in the partition, and from the right by the closer buildings. This doesn't stop it attracting another RPG, this time from further up on the right, and it doesn't stop one of my infantrymen getting winged by AK fire as his team pushes forward. The team decide they better not do as they're told actually, and leg it back to the relative safety of the partition. Leaving the bridge seems to be the tricky part right now, but if I can bring more forces up to my current position, then I might be able to build enough fire superiority to overcome the enemy and gain some freedom of movement. So up goes the platoon command squad in their M113 to exert some control over my infantry. As they roll forwards, the close-in insurgent is finally hosed down with 50 cal fire, and when the RPGs on either flank open up again, the M113s manage to bring a couple of them down. This, combined with the impetus of the platoon leaders shouting, gives my infantry the kick up the backside they need to get going again. Within a few turns, they're up to the lone insurgent's position and they're waiting for a few more bodies before moving on to that right-hand compound. This is where most of my problems seem to be coming from. The right flank as a whole seems more problematic than the left, though I suspect I'm just playing whack-a-mole. With very few confirmed kills on the insurgents, I feel a lot like I'm just temporarily suppressing them. This is almost certainly what has been happening on the left. The insurgents over there have had enough time to get their acts together again whilst I've been focusing on the right, and they suddenly pop up, launching a barrage of RPGs. One connects with the platoon leader's M113 and knocks it out. The crew scramble out intact, and the 3 other RPGs in the salvo miss, but now I'm not only down an APC, but I have to start splitting my fire between the insurgents on the left and the right at the same time. This isn't something the 2 remaining M113s on my bank can do very effectively, and in any case I need more infantry on the far side, so in goes the 3rd and final platoon vehicle. To make room for this, the first M113 tries to move off the X, as it were, and take up a new position by my infantry on the right. As it moves forward, it attracts more RPGs from both flanks, and one from the left manages to connect. So now half my APCs are gone. At least some of the insurgents on the right have gotten sick of all the suppressive fire and decided to make a break for it, getting cut down by my infantry. That little ray of sunshine doesn't do much to help though, and as the company HQ M113 moves up behind the BMP, the final platoon APC takes up the position of the original, where it had sat safely for the last 10 minutes, and immediately takes an RPG to the front. So things aren't going as well as they could be. Probably the one chance of really salvaging this now is to get my infantry, who haven't suffered that many casualties so far, somewhere a little safer than the end of the bridge. The closest area of relative safety is that compound on the right, so of course they have to kick the insurgents out. Unfortunately, there's a small mob of them on the ground floor of the closest 2-story building, shielded from all my fire by a single story in front, and they quickly shut down the team I've moved up. That's bad enough, but the team I have covering them is hit by an RPG as well. This one has come in from a whole new RPG team up on top of the industrial complex in depth on the far right, and with my much reduced fire support, I now have yet another target that I need to suppress. Some quick fire and movement by the infantry gets an M72 Law into position where it clears 3 of the 4 insurgents out of the nearest building and provokes the lone survivor to throw his weapon down. This allows me to take control of the compound, but while I don't really gain anything from this, the insurgents are able to pelt my infantry from RPGs from multiple angles. I've shot my wad here. Most of my vehicles have been knocked out, the remaining M113 and the BMP are low on ammunition, my infantry are pretty much stuck where they are under fire, and they're not capable of further offensive action. So I'm pressing the ceasefire button. It's a minor defeat. I've only touched one of my 2 phase line objectives, the one at the end of the bridges, and have simply not killed enough insurgents or kept enough of my own men alive to achieve my other objectives. I've lost 10 men dead and 6 wounded, as well as 3 M113s and a PBR, while the insurgents have lost 13 dead and 13 wounded, but still have 69 men still going. So, where did it all go wrong? I think the big tactical problem in this one was biting off more than I could chew. I went up the right-hand bridges on the basis that I would be in the middle of all that open ground, and the distance to the enemy on either flank would be as far as it could be, making their fire less effective. In hindsight, that was probably a terrible idea. First of all, I was still exposed to all the insurgents around the edges of the bridge exit, and even though they were all at range, there were so many RPG teams that I couldn't suppress or destroy them all, and given the volume of fire, something was going to get through at some point. It may well have been a better idea to use the left bridges and focus on that flank. This way the enemy on the right would be much further away and correspondingly much less effective, if not actually out of range. So I'd only be fighting the left flank on its own. Sure, I'd have been fighting the left at much closer range than I might like, but focusing on one side would have meant fewer individual targets for me and better concentration of fire from my support. Plus, my forces would have had a much shorter distance to go on the left to get off the X at the end of the bridge and into cover. This looks like it might have done well with the benefit of hindsight, but without that hindsight, choosing to attack into the denser of 2 urban areas with such a small and fragile force didn't seem like a very good idea. To compound the problem, I hung around in the kill zone getting shot at for far too long, achieving very little except alternately suppressing the flanks until my luck started to run out. So I could certainly have handled this differently. At the same time, this is a work in progress mission converted from an old Shock Force 1 scenario by Combat Intman called Karmat Ali QRF. The Blue Force in the original is a British veteran armoured infantry platoon plus a company HQ, also in a warrior, whereas the player's force in the conversion is, under the hood, a Syrian airborne platoon in BTRs plus a company HQ in another BTR, a BMP-1 and 2 BRDMs, all the regular experience. That's a longer list of stuff, but I think the warriors with their 30mm cannons, explosive reactive armour and thermal sights would be a lot more effective at dealing with all those RPG teams than the M113s and the BMP, being able to spot and destroy the enemy at a greater distance and having much more effective protection. Plus, of course, a platoon's worth of British armoured infantry is both better armed and better equipped with radios, optics and body armour than the Imperial Cavalry troops of Bong Hai. In other words, I think that the Blue Force in the conversion is substantially weaker than in the original, and with it looking like the insurgent force hasn't been changed, the balance is probably a little bit off, and giving Blue a second armoured cav platoon or cutting down the number of insurgent RPG groups on the far side might go some way to bringing it back. That's my opinion though. It depends a lot on how the mission is supposed to play. For all I know, I've missed something, or it's just supposed to be tough. That then is a quick look at the Shock Force 2 Heaven and Earth mod beta. It's still a work in progress, and Combat Mission is not the easiest thing in the world to mod, so it's a little rough around the edges, but if you've got a pseudo NAM itch to scratch, check it out, the link's in the description down below. As a bonus, the mod has also reskinned all of the modern units as well, so if you're bored of the Syrian deserts, you can go somewhere a bit greener. Hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I'll catch you in the next video.